Hello, welcome back. It's Anna. Okay, hold on. Before you scroll past this, I need you to stop for a second. I don't usually start like this, but something about right now feels different. If you clicked on this video, if something pulled you here in this exact moment, I need you to pay very close attention to what I'm about to say because some people are about to face something they've been avoiding, and I feel like you might be one of them. Let me be really clear with you. This isn't about scaring you. This is about waking you up. Let's just pause right here for a second. Um, I'm going to be honest with you. This one feels heavy, not in a bad way, but in a way that matters, in a way that if you're here right now, you need to hear. Some people notice that right before something big shifts in their life, there's a problem they've been ignoring, something they've been pushing down, something they told themselves wasn't that serious. But it can feel like that knot in your stomach when you're lying in bed at night, that restlessness when you're trying to focus at work, that tension you carry in your shoulders that won't go away. You know what I'm talking about. One possible interpretation here is that you're being asked to face something, not by fate, not by forces beyond you, but by your own inner knowing. And ignoring it is starting to cost you. Let me slow down for a second. You may recognize this feeling if you've been telling yourself is less than #0. 5# is greater than I'll deal with it later. It's not that bad. I can handle this on my own. But something in you knows that later is now. It can feel like standing at the edge of a decision you've been avoiding, a conversation you've been postponing, a truth you've been too afraid to look at directly. Some people describe this as the moment right before everything becomes clear, right before the problem that seemed impossible to solve suddenly shows you exactly what needs to happen. But first, you have to stop running from it. Hold on. This feels really important. One symbolic layer here might be sitting at your desk, staring at your phone, knowing you need to send that message, make that call, have that conversation, and every part of you is finding reasons not to. You may find that this week, or maybe even today, the problem you've been avoiding is going to demand your attention. Not in a dramatic way, but in a way you can't ignore anymore. I feel like some of you are dealing with something in a relationship, something you've been trying to fix by being patient, by giving more time, by hoping it'll just resolve itself. It can feel like walking on eggshells, like constantly second guessing yourself, like carrying weight that isn't even yours. One possible reading here is that the problem isn't the other person. The problem is that you've been waiting for them to change instead of changing how you respond. Some people notice that the moment they finally face the problem, the moment they stop avoiding the hard conversation, the difficult choice, the uncomfortable truth is less than #0. 5# is greater than. Everything starts to shift, not magically, but practically. Let's pause for a moment. What if the problem you're facing is actually showing you where you've been giving your power away, where you've been shrinking yourself, where you've been tolerating what you know deep down isn't right for you? You may recognize this if you've been feeling unusually drained lately, unusually off, like something's not sitting right, but you can't quite name it. That's the problem, speaking. It can feel like your body trying to tell you something your mind doesn't want to accept yet. Tightness in your chest when you think about a certain situation. Restlessness when you try to sleep, that subtle dread before you have to see someone or deal with something. One symbolic interpretation might be standing in your kitchen, making coffee, and suddenly feeling the weight of everything you've been carrying and realizing you don't have to carry it alone or at all. I'm not sure why, but this feels like one of those weeks where the problem you've been avoiding is going to show up in a very real way, maybe through a conversation, maybe through a realization, maybe through something breaking down that you've been trying to hold together. Some people describe this as the moment when denial stops working, when the excuses don't land anymore, when the distractions don't distract. It can feel like being forced to look at something you've been turning away from for months, maybe years. And here's the thing, facing it won't destroy you. Avoiding it might. Let me slow down. One possible layer here is that you're being given an opportunity, not a punishment, not a test, an opportunity to finally address what's been quietly eroding your peace. You may find that when you stop running from the problem, when you turn toward it with honest eyes, it's not as overwhelming as you thought. Some people notice that the anticipation of facing something is worse than actually facing it. The fear of the conversation is worse than having it. The worry about the outcome is worse than taking action. It can feel like ripping off a band-aid, sharp for a moment, then relief. One symbolic reading might be sitting across from someone and finally saying the thing you've been holding back, feeling your heart race, feeling vulnerable, and then feeling lighter. I feel like some of you are dealing with a problem at work, something that's been building, a dynamic that's been off, a situation where you've been undervalued or overlooked, and you've been telling yourself it's fine, but it's not fine. You may recognize this if you've been fantasizing about quitting, about speaking up, about setting a boundary that feels too bold. That's not just frustration. That's wisdom trying to surface. Some people describe this moment as the point where staying silent becomes more painful than speaking up, where playing small becomes more exhausting than standing tall. It can feel like holding your breath for so long that finally exhaling feels like an act of rebellion. One possible interpretation is that the problem you're facing is asking you is less than #0. 7 is greater than to choose yourself, not selfishly. Honestly, let's sit with this. What if the warning isn't about something bad coming? What if it's about something necessary arriving, a reckoning, a clarity, a breaking point that actually leads to breakthrough? You may find that this week brings a moment where you can't avoid the problem anymore, where the choice becomes clear, where staying becomes harder than leaving, or where silence becomes harder than truth. Some people notice that right before they make a major shift, there's this uncomfortable period where everything feels uncertain, where they question themselves, where they wonder if they're overreacting. It can feel like standing at the edge of something and not being able to see the bottom, but feeling in your bones that you have to jump anyway. One symbolic layer might be deleting a text you wrote and rewrote 5 times, then finally sending it, then immediately feeling that rush of fear and freedom at the same time. That's facing the problem. I feel like for some of you, this problem is financial, something you've been ignoring, a decision you've been putting off, a reality you haven't wanted to look at, and it's catching up. You may recognize this if you've been feeling anxious about money, about stability, about the choices you've made or need to make. It can feel like opening your banking app and immediately closing it, avoiding emails, telling yourself you'll deal with it next week. One possible reading here is that facing the numbers, facing the reality is less than #0. 5# is greater than is the first step to changing it. Avoidance keeps you stuck. Awareness creates options. Let me slow down for a second. Some people describe the relief that comes not from solving the problem immediately, but from finally admitting it exists, from saying it out loud, from writing it down, from asking for help. It can feel like exhaling after holding your breath for months. One symbolic interpretation might be sitting down with someone you trust and saying, I need to tell you something I've been afraid to say, and feeling your whole body relax. Just from naming it, hold on, this feels important, really important. You may find that the problem you're facing is connected to a pattern you've been repeating, a way you've been showing up that no longer serves you, a belief you've been carrying that isn't even yours. Some people notice that the same problem keeps showing up in different forms until they finally address the root. It can feel like different people, same dynamic, different jobs, same issue, different situations, same feeling. That's not bad luck. That's an invitation to look deeper. One possible layer here is that this problem is a teacher, not a punishment, a mirror showing you where you need to grow, where you need to set boundaries, where you need to choose differently. I'm not sure why, but I feel like some of you already know exactly what the problem is. You just haven't wanted to admit it, because admitting it means you have to do something about it. You may recognize this if is less than #0, 5# is greater than. Every time you think about the situation, your mind immediately jumps to distraction, to rationalization, to but maybe. That's avoidance, and it's costing you your peace. Some people describe this as the moment when they realize they've been more afraid of change than they are of staying stuck. It can feel like waking up. One symbolic reading might be walking home from work and suddenly seeing everything clearly, the problem, the pattern, the choice, and knowing you can't unsee it now. Let's pause. Take a breath. Whatever problem you're facing, whether it's a relationship, a job, a financial situation, a health issue, or just a deep inner knowing that something needs to change, you don't have to solve it all today, but you do have to stop pretending it isn't there. You may find that simply acknowledging the problem, simply turning toward it instead of away from it, begins to shift something. Some people notice that the moment they stop avoiding, solutions start appearing, not because of magic, but because clarity creates action. It can feel like finally admitting you're lost and then immediately seeing the signs that were there all along. One possible interpretation is that you've been asking for guidance, and this problem is the answer, not the obstacle, the path. I feel like this week is asking you to be brave, not fearless, just willing to look at what's real, willing to admit what you've been avoiding, willing to take one small step toward resolution. You may recognize that you don't need to have all the answers. You just need to start. Take a breath. Whatever you're facing, it's yours to meet, not alone, but honestly. What resonates is yours to hold. What needs to shift is yours to acknowledge. You get to decide what happens next.